Don't say anything. Welcome to First Class Fantasy Overtime. This is Theo Gremminger, and I'm joined with Dario Offstein. Billy Muzio is off today. Dario, you are in which state?
I'm in New Jersey. I was at the Jets and Bills game last night in MetLife Stadium, and I'm crashed here briefly with our CTO, Frank Lakatos. If you guys are tight with the player profiler following, you know that Frank is the absolute hero that makes all of this possible. So we're, just making my way around the country, headed to Philly for the Eagles game next. And we've got some questions already pouring in for this AMA. But first, how have you been, Theo, too?
I've been in Vegas. I'm back. I'm on Long Island. You're in beautiful northern New Jersey with Frank. And we're doing a Reddit AMA. Every single week you can find Dario and I, sometimes Billy Muzio as well, and maybe some mystery guests from the Roto Underworld joining us at times, Dario. And we're answering all of your questions on Reddit. This was a lot of fun. Last time we did this, Dario, Billy, and I, we had like a stream between the. We said we're putting it on YouTube, so look for us on YouTube. This is not going to be a podcast. You have to tune into YouTube or Twitter in order to see this. But Dario, let's get this started. What is our first question?
Well, first question is a good one. What are your top 3 claims this week, and how much fab on each?
Okay, so this is, I'll take this too. I just did the waiver wire article, and I use 25% or less available for Yahoo League. So, these guys, need to meet a certain threshold for us. I think a lot of people might tell you to go grab Kenneth Gainwell. He's rostered. If you're watching this and you're deep into the weeds, Kenneth Gainwell is not going to be available in your fantasy football league. But there are some really interesting ads. I think Kyren Williams is extremely interesting. Kyren Williams had a really, really good game this past weekend. He was a top 10 running back. He ran ahead of Cam Akers. And Dario, he found the end zone twice, and he ran a lot of routes, but they didn't utilize him as a pass catcher. And that's sort of like his MO coming out of Notre Dame. So I think if he's getting this sort of usage and he's featured and he's running all these routes, he's going to continue to put up like RB2 or better numbers. Then obviously the low-hanging fruit is Puka Nacua, who was incredible. He had 15 targets this week, which is just nuts. And a lot of times this was the first read. The plays were designed for Puka Nacua. It was absolutely wild. I also think if you're in a deep league and you want to save some fab, Tutu Atwell, who was a second-round pick, Dario, a lot of speed, little guy, skinny, but he had 17.9 PPR points. If you want I can't believe we're using these words, Dario, but if you want the Puka Nacua arbitrage play, it's Tutu Atwell.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely crazy. Those guys combining for 25 targets in a double-digit Rams win is definitely not on most people's bingo cards for week 1. But you've had two good names there on the Rams offense. First person that jumped out at me in this is I think Josh Kelly needs to be rostered in your league if he's not rostered. And I think, 15, 20%, especially with this Eckler ankle injury news. The thing that excites me most with Josh Kelly right now is the design of that run game with Kellen Moore was so much more creative, so much more efficient than we ever saw under Joe Lombardi. This Dolphins defense that they ran all over was no slouch. So I think that, so far we've named 3 players all in Los Angeles.
And where are you from, Dario? Are you showing a little bit of bias yet again?
Well, you brought up the first 2 names. I don't know.
Maybe you were in my DMs, but so there's a lot though. I would double check. Like Josh Kelly, great call, Dario. Like Josh Kelly, the problem with Josh Kelly is like if you're doing waivers and you're putting him in tonight, we might find out more information about Eckler. And then you could potentially, if you're in Wednesday waiver leagues, find out more information tomorrow. So like Josh Kelly might go up if we hear that the Eckler situation is actually troublesome and not something just annoying, then Josh Kelly, your 20% might be too low because Josh Kelly looked really, really good. And again, we have to take what these NFL teams do on week 1 as the truth. They've had all summer long to prepare and scheme for guys, and they got Josh Kelly, heavily involved, and this was in a neutral game script. So I'm with you. I think that's a great call. Roschon Johnson, if you're in some leagues, Roschon Johnson might be available. He had the most catches on the Bears, and he looked like the best runner. This is a great week for the waiver wire, in my opinion. There's tons
Week
of help.
one is always as good as it's going to get. I think that's another thing, we forget. I mean, I've got your article pulled up right now. Hard to believe that Luke Musgrave is still available in 81% of Yahoo leagues. Hunter Henry was the tight end one on the week. And I was at that game too. And he was definitely Mac Jones looking in his direction. I think that was a little bit of a game plan thing. I wouldn't expect quite that much involvement for Hunter Henry just because the weakness of that Eagles defense is the linebackers. And he was the guy who was best able to take advantage of that and get that offense going on Sunday. So I think that Hunter Henry, man, I mean, week one, I don't know if this was one of your takeaways, but one of mine is that the tight end landscape is such a wasteland right now. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, TJ Hawkinson was tight end 3. Hayden Hurst, I believe, was a top 2 tight end this week. It's wild, but it's like anything, Dario. Week one, we don't want to get too crazy. And Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, both missing the week. Darren Waller, absolute train wreck that offense. I expect that New York's going to bounce back at least a little bit. But it's a great week to hit the waivers actively. Definitely check out my article. I go very, very deep for this. Even if you play in NFFC, FFPC leagues, if you're in 20-man roster leagues, there's going to be somebody for you. And I'll throw this one out, Dario. If you're a dynasty manager looking for waiver wire ads, Rashid Shaheed is a thing. I think that he might slip through the cracks.
Man, if Rashid Shaheed was still on the waiver wire in your dynasty league, consider that a gift.
100%. And I think it was very interesting how, he's the number 3 wide receiver, but they're scheming for him. They gave him 2 rushing attempts to go with the targets. He found the end zone. And I'm kind of bullish on this Saints offense. I know that they had a tough game against Tennessee, but they get Alvin Kamara back in 2 games. And the wide receiver core looks very, very good. And Derek Carr, he completed, I think it was like 6 passes for 20 yards or more. So they're taking shots downfield. It's exactly what we want to see. When they get Kamara back for the intermediate game, it's wheels up. They can definitely win that division. But I think we covered the waiver wire.
Yeah, let's close out this question with just give me a quick percentage of fab that you think you would throw at these guys. I got 6 names down here: Kyron, Puka, Josh Kelly, Roshan, Luke Musgrave, and then this last one, Rashid Shaheed.
I'll use FFPC in context here. I don't think there's a 50% plus guy. There's not anybody you want to go completely nuts for. Dario brought up Josh Kelly. I think even if you don't want Josh Kelly, you have to price check people. I think 20 to 25% is appropriate based on the quality of that offense. Kyron Williams, I would go a little bit more aggressive. Kyron Williams, I'm going 30%.
Yeah, he looked like legit. I mean, it's 2 years. It's like an annual tradition now for Sean McVay to faceplant Cam Akers in the season opener, and we know that they liked Kyron Williams last year, and he got hurt on the opening kickoff. So I'm buying the usage for him for sure.
The tight ends, if you want one of these tight ends, it's such a deep waiver wire grouping of tight ends that I think you could price check a few of these guys, and you're going to walk away with one of them. I like the idea of getting Hayden Hurst for super cheap. Wide receiver wise, Puka Nacua is going to go for 40% in one of these leagues. I think that I'm price checking with 35%. And Dario, I'll ask you this. If Puka Nacua was a 2nd round draft pick or 3rd round draft pick, and he did what he did this past week,
yeah,
people would be losing their minds and bidding 75% on him. He's a 5th round draft pick. He had an ungodly target share last year in college, and then he starts out with 15 targets this week. He could be like 2021 Hunter Renfrow. So I don't want to miss out on Puka Nacua, but again, I'm at least price enforcing these guys. And then who's our last one we talked about? Roshan Johnson, if he's available in my league, I'm going 25%.
Yeah. I mean, Roshan Johnson, he looked every bit the best running back on the Bears. We know that most of his work came when the game was out of hand, but you don't just look that good and then not get featured in the game plan more so going forward. Rookie running back, great situation. Concerning outing for that offense as a whole, definitely. But I think that I'm with you there. So let's ship that. That was our first question. Next question we've gotten in on Reddit is Drake London, Kyle Pitts, any holding optimism, or did we just get suckered into another year of same old, same old?
Well, I think that it was incredibly frustrating. Arthur Smith in North Jersey, there might be a couple people who'd like to whack him, especially the fantasy football managers, Long Island as well. But, at the end of the day, they can't target the running backs at this high a percent every single week. The running backs had an ungodly target share. And there's sometimes maybe it's a hopeful comment, Dario, but there's sometimes like a squeaky wheel gets the grease in fantasy football. And potentially you see a couple of first quarter targets to Drake London, because this is a guy that has undeniable talent, saw the workload to end last season. Basically, my bottom line is I probably should bench either one of them for anyone with a pulse this week.
Yeah.
But I'm going to remain with a little bit of optimism. I think that the game flow against Carolina
do you think do you think you would bench Pitts for Luke Musgrave this upcoming week?
God, that hurts you to even think about. I think they're very, 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 very close. If Christian Watson, let's put it like this: if Christian Watson misses, I'm definitely considering that even more.
Yeah.
If Christian Watson comes back, then I'm considering Pitts. It's terrible. It's awful. And the worst thing about it is the guy wins doing this. So I don't think my hashtag fire Arthur Smith, tweet is going to do anything.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think particularly, like you said, for the matchup against Carolina, once the Falcons get ahead, you can forget about Drake London and Kyle Pitts in those games. And that's just, it's a concerning place to be. I think so. I guess to answer this question, I agree with you. Definitely need to bench London for now, because you can find other options at wide receiver with a pulse.
Yeah, I mean, if you have like, here's one for you, Dario, because you attended the game at Gillette Stadium. The Patriots had 50 plus pass attempts against the Eagles. They now play Miami this week. Are you gonna ride the 11 target Kendrick Bourne, or would you go with Drake London? And how sickening is that I'm even asking you that?
I mean, I would hope that I'm in a league where I don't have to go that deep, and I have, like, I don't know, say I'm trying, like, someone else on my bench before I resort to the extremes of Kendrick Bourne. But I mean, when Billy and I were going over weekly projections going into this week, Devontae Parker was ruled out Saturday night, maybe Sunday morning, and we just looked at each other and we said that it's going to be a Kendrick Bourne game. So, everyone who played him in DFS is counting their stacks right now. And
yeah, it's very frustrating, and Arthur Smith is a madman, and he needs to be stopped at all costs.
But yeah, I guess to answer your question, it's tempting because the Patriots, I think the Patriots defense will probably slow down the Dolphins more so than the Chargers did. And I don't expect the Patriots to throw the ball 50 times, maybe even at any point the rest of this season. So I think you can try to do better than Kendrick Bourne. But yeah, I agree with you that Drake London should be on your bench until we see some signs of life.
Here's a good question. The Kansas City wide receiver to own, in your opinion? I'm going to say I'm very intrigued by Rashee Rice.
Me too.
And I'm intrigued by Rashee Rice because not just because he scored a touchdown, but because of the inept play of the rest of the Kansas City wide receivers. We know what MVS is. It was a very disappointing game for Sky Moore. I'm definitely not cutting Sky Moore. He was on the field pretty much the entire game. But Kadarius Toney, I think, is a gadget player. And I think that they need to take a look at how they use him. He almost scored on a rushing attempt. I think that's kind of what he is a gadget player that you can do manufactured things for. But I think it's Rashee Rice. If I could pick any single Kansas City wide receiver to roster the rest of the year, yeah, I think I'm going with Rice. I think his role could grow.
Yeah, I think it's I agree with you. I think it's Rice because rookie wide receiver. I mean, at this point, if Sky Moore, if you can't earn targets on a full complement of routes alongside MVS, alongside Justin Watson, alongside a rookie second rounder, Rashee Rice, which is what Sky Moore was last year, I think that just in terms of pure upside, we know that rookie wide receivers perform better over the second half of fantasy seasons. I think you kind of have to go with the unknown quantity. I'm definitely looking to add and hold Rashee Rice wherever possible.
We got another question. Can Breece Hall finish top RB1 in 2023? I think he can absolutely finish as an RB1. I don't think he will finish as the RB1, but the measuring stick to finish inside of the RB1 range, Dario, what are we thinking here? About 14 points per game, 15 points per game?
Yeah, I mean, this would be a very different question if Aaron Rodgers hadn't torn his Achilles yesterday, right? Like the upside of this offense, I think, is going to be significantly capped. But this is what we saw last year when the Jets were winning games early in the season. The formula was really good defense and Breece Hall. That was it. That was how they were winning games last year until Breece Hall tore his ACL. I think that they could find themselves leaning back on that formula sooner than they would like to because Breece Hall was the best thing they had going for them on offense. So I think that we've seen the talent from him. I mean, the guy tore his ACL less than a year ago, and he was breaking off explosive runs yesterday, making tacklers miss in the backfield like it was nothing. So I absolutely think, I mean, when they, to the person asking this question, if you're saying top RB1 as in ahead of McCaffrey and Eckler, I think it's a stretch because of the offensive environment and the touchdowns. But I think easily top 12 running back for me rest of season. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. He's certainly, the talent looks like it's there. Can he hold up? And does the offense take such a big step back now? That's just the other problem. But he certainly looks explosive and talented. I think that it's definitely a fair bet. I think you feel great if you got him, at that like 4-5 turn when he dipped. So I feel fine about that prediction.
Yeah, and I think that Dalvin Cook is only going to get eased out as Breece Hall gets more usage. Like Michael Carter was getting some third down snaps last night. I think they were very conscious of limiting Breece Hall, and he was still just kicking ass because he's one of the most talented running backs in the league.
What's the next one?
Charbonnet or Spears rest of season?
Spears outsnaps Derrick Henry was one of the weirdest takeaways yesterday for a neutral script game. And Spears had, obviously way less carries, but he ran more routes. He had more targets, which is not unexpected, but I think it was like kind of the snap. So it's still probably Charbonnet. I think if everything being equal, if Charbonnet has the backfield to himself versus Spears having the backfield to himself, I think the Seattle offense is going to rebound. And I think Charbonnet has a, potential for just handling a little bit more volume, but I'd like both of them. They're both in good situations and they're both high-end handcuffs.
Yeah. Okay. So Charbonnet still ahead for now. I agree with you. We think I don't want to overreact to the Seahawks just 1 week. I think that they'll rebound, and Charbonnet still has the higher draft capital. I'm trying to think I'm going to pull up the usage from that game because I haven't seen many stats. One of the downsides of this big tour I'm doing with going to all these games is I'm actually like I need to rework my data flows where I'm just ingesting what happened on Sundays because I can't watch Red Zone when I'm in the stands. But yeah, I mean, Charbonnet getting 3 carries to Kenneth Walker's 12, not ideal. Looks like he also wasn't targeted, but I think that, I mean, to me, the second rounder, the profile, and the upside of a slightly of a better offense, I think still is keeping Charbonnet slightly ahead.
All right, let's keep this going. Was CeeDee's performance a sign of things to come for fantasy football this season, or should we consider the Giants game a fluke? I think that CeeDee is a locked-in wide receiver 1. I think that Dak's going to have to do a lot almost every other game. They completely manhandled the Giants. The defense was unbelievable. Posted a huge number. I don't change anything with CeeDee Lamb. How about you, Dario?
Yeah, I mean, I've been probably the most bearish person on CeeDee Lamb at PlayerProfiler. So I think that like, take it with that grain of salt.
Where did you have him in your projections ballpark?
I probably had him as my personal wide receiver 9 this season. Like I was taking AJ Brown ahead of him. I was taking Devontae Adams ahead of him. So I think that I just have generally had some concerns over his ability to become a 30% target share guy when we've seen him be a 25% target share guy. And I think that Brandon Cooks was going to siphon off the targets that were going from Dalton Schultz anyway. Jake Ferguson's usage was pretty crazy in last night's game, or I guess Sunday night. So I think that with CeeDee Lamb, there's just gonna be I think someone else already replied something along these lines that there's just gonna be games where the Cowboys defense makes the other team completely irrelevant.
They have an absolute mob in Dallas. That defense was just, they completely manhandled New York. It was unbelievable. They looked absolutely terrific.
All right, Theo, this question's for you. Which of the teams that you drafted in Vegas last weekend are you highest on right now? Any standout in particular after having seen week 1?
So again, I don't get too reactionary from week 1. I don't want to get too hyped if a team put up a good number, and I don't want to get too low if a team struggled. I think a lot of times week 1 is very, very funny. I know last year, the T. Higgins this year posts up a goose egg, and last year he had 4 points in week 1. Devonta Smith last year posted 0 points. Austin Eckler was last year's RB1 overall, and I think he had about 10 PPR points last year in week 1. Derrick Henry posted a very, very, very low number in week 1 last year. And then obviously a couple weeks later, he starts ripping them off again. So I don't want to get, too high or too low. A couple teams did well. A couple teams had poor starts. But we had one $3,000 varsity league, which is an FFPC contained league, and our team looks really, really good. 1 or 2 main event teams are looking very, very strong. I have one NFFC team that started out very well, so we'll see. It's kind of like I've talked about this with a lot of high stakes people, and I think that you need to, after a few weeks, you need to take a step back and look and see, is your team scoring 150 points a week? Because after the dust settles and you kind of have your lineup set in these 20-man leagues, 150 is the number you really want to hit. If you're not hitting 150, you could be 4-0, and you still have to, worry about improving your team. Because at the end of the day, the points matter in a lot of these leagues. But yeah, a couple of them look good. We had one team with obviously I had a Cowboys defense on a couple of teams. I had a number of Tyreek Hill teams, and that's hard to look bad with Tyreek Hill right now. I had a Aaron Jones team do very well. And I crammed in Hayden Hurst in 1 or 2 lineups in tight end premium where I needed a flex, and that worked out pretty well. I don't know if that's great process, Dario, but it worked out.
Mm-hmm. Hayden Hurst is someone, I think one of the very first episodes of Man vs. Machine, I was pounding the table for Hayden Hurst getting, he's not someone you get excited about, but he's going to get the targets this season, and we saw that in week 1. And it's already happening. He
could be this year's Tyler Higbee, like a tight end and Dario, he had 70 plus targets last year in Cincinnati, surrounded by very quality offensive weapons. This year he goes to Carolina, where the most targeted wide receiver was our guy, Jonathan Mingo. Thielen ran 1 million routes and didn't get targeted. And I think that there's a chance that this is going to be a weekly thing where Hurst is the security blanket, where he's getting 5 or so targets every single week. And at the end of the day, he's going to get enough red zone looks when they get there that he could have a decent season. So I think he's like a dark horse to be a tight end 1 this year, just based on the fact that he seems to be meshing with Bryce Young.
Yeah. Here's another good, straightforward question. Would you drop McKinnon or Gibson for Kyron Williams and Josh Kelly in a PPR league? I'm leaning yes, especially on McKinnon. I think Gibson, it just depends on how deep your league is. If he's the bottom, if he's the odd man out, I think, wouldn't you rather have Kyron Williams than Antonio Gibson if you had to put one of them in your lineup?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, they had the entire summer to prepare, and they get into a neutral game script game against Arizona, and it's a Brian Robinson show. I think that Antonio Gibson
fumbles as well. Don't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's kind of the thing that's held him back with Ron Rivera. For these years, it's been the fumbling. And I just think that Brian Robinson, they like him maybe more than fantasy managers did. I think if you drafted Brian Robinson, you're feeling pretty good about things. But Kyron Williams, I think it's for real. I absolutely agree with you. Both those guys I'd cut for McKinnon. I think that the Josh Kelly versus Antonio Gibson question is interesting. Yeah, if I knew that Austin Eckler was going to miss a couple games, 100% I'm doing it.
The Chargers offense is more exciting.
Yeah.
The upside is higher. And then I think that there's already more of a, like, if there's clearly more of a role that Kelly has right this moment than Gibson has in his own offense, we know it's a significantly better offense. So I think that, yeah, I mean, it's crazy to say this, right? Like, if I would have told you 5 days ago that we would be telling people to drop Antonio Gibson for Kyron Williams and Josh Kelly, like, I think that would be like a distress sign, like that, something I would have said if I was being held hostage. But now it's the unpredictability of week one.
Absolutely. I'm going through and answering some of these questions. Appreciate everybody who is putting them into the chat. Here's another good one. How do you determine which of speculated waivers pickup are landmines out of the top waiver pickups this week? So based on your fab pricing as your waiver priority, where would Gainwell fall there? So Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Josh Kelly, Roshan. I think Gainwell, based on the quality of the offense, would be somewhere towards the top of that list. I think that he, again, this is a Philadelphia offense that is much better than the Eagles, better than Chicago, and even better than Dario's Los Angeles Chargers. So I'm taking Gainwell over all of them. I also think Gainwell probably costs you less than Puka Nacua this week, just because people are gonna pay for last week's performance as well. And I think I think it's a good question is, how can I spot like a false waiver wire pickup, like a landmine type player? And I think, Dario, for me, it's pretty easy. I'm not going to pay for the points. I also want to see that a guy is running a lot of routes if he's a wide receiver. And I want to make sure that the guy's playing a lot of snaps. And if he's not playing a lot of snaps, then I want to look at things like targets per route run, or, some higher level metrics. Like a guy like Rashid Shaheed might be on the field slightly less, but he's getting the ball a lot. So I want to add context into the final decision. And I think for me, snaps is always a big part. Routes run is always a big part. How about you, Dario?
Yeah, I think especially with, like we said, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, there's a balance between how efficient is this guy when they're getting the ball, how is their opportunity consistent. Rashid Shaheed is someone who, because of what he did last year, we wanted to continue seeing that, and we wanted to see that in an expanded role. And he clearly showed that. This Saints offense is clearly trusting him, and the explosiveness is there. The targets are there on a route run basis. So I think that Shaheed is, it makes him a great waiver wire ad. But like, I guess I think one pretty decent counterexample would be Kendrick Bourne. Like, if you're rushing to your waiver wires and pushing the button for Kendrick Bourne ahead of, say, Puka Nacua, that would be bad process because fewer targets, the role is not secured because Devontae Parker was out last week. And if you're just purely chasing fantasy points because he had 2 touchdowns, like, you're not going to get 2 touchdowns from a guy every week. I think chasing touchdowns is one of the easiest landmines you can avoid in terms of waiver pickups.
Absolutely. Another question in the chat. A lot of underperforming quarterbacks this week. Is that just a factor of no preseason and offenses starting slowly, troubling given we were investing more draft capital this year? Late round QB was a thing of the past. And more specifically, any concern about Lamar Jackson moving forward? I don't have any concern about Lamar Jackson. I'm not sure about you, Dario. I think that the J.K. Dobbins loss is not really going to hurt Lamar. If anything, there could be a couple more manufactured runs for him than maybe they would have liked. And I think we also didn't have Mark Andrews. But I'll say, Dario, the thing that was really, really exciting for me was Zay Flowers looks like an absolute star. And that's a guy that I think is his role with Lamar is going to grow throughout the season. So I have no concern about Lamar Jackson. And usually, like the Joe Burrow slow start, guys like that, I usually take with like kind of a grain of salt. I think these guys are going to bounce back. They've shown us in the past how talented they are and how productive they are as fantasy players. Again, we don't want to get too reactionary. If it happens 3 weeks in a row, we can talk about it, but I expect Joe Burrow to bounce back this week.
Yeah, I think that game between the Bengals and the Browns, I'm really just not trying to draw too many conclusions from it or make any predictions. The Browns defense looked really good, but most importantly, I think the weather just made it impossible for Joe Burrow to get anything going. And then the Browns offense, I like, as much as I loved seeing the Nick Chubb targets, I think those Nick Chubb targets were also a byproduct of the weather. So I don't expect him to have 4 receptions at all, maybe possibly not at all this entire season. So
how about that Cleveland Browns defense, Dario? I think they might be a little bit underrated too. They completely shut down Cincinnati. Like if I'm looking at one of these, trying to come like with a takeaway is I think that the Green Bay defense should have been drafted more. And I think that the Cleveland defense should have been drafted more. I think both those guys are going to be on a lot of waiver wires this week.
So for context, this is the first year that we've done full defense and kicker rankings and projections on a weekly basis at Player Profiler. We had the Packers come out, I think if not number 1, they were number 2 in our model this week, because the biggest predictor for a defense in fantasy is the opposing offense. And Justin Fields is always at the top of the leaderboards for sacks, for turnovers, for touchdowns against. And we saw all of that come to fruition for the Packers defense. We know that they've had the hype these last couple seasons and sometimes not delivered on it, but they were in a really good situation. And I think because of that, I'm a little skeptical just what they might look like in their upcoming games, because they've just had what will likely be one of the best matchups of the season for a fantasy defense. But I'm with you that the Browns defense, I mean, Myles Garrett looks like he could have a career season with the shape he was playing in yesterday and the way that Jim Schwartz was utilizing him along that defensive front.
I've got David. This is a question. I've got David Njoku at tight end. Should I keep him or try and grab someone off the waiver wire? I personally think that David Njoku is very talented, and I'd be looking for a bounce back game. Again, they kind of manhandled Cincinnati. And Dario, we had like a 15 carry Jerome Ford second half. That's not going to be the weekly game plan.
Yeah.
So I'm still confident in David Njoku, but I'll say to this Reddit poster that you could grab a second tight end if you're worried about it. You can grab a guy like Hayden Hurst.
Are you just reading my response to that comment? Because
I didn't even see it.
Yeah. Refresh your page. That's exactly what I said to that guy.
Yeah. And let me ask you one quick guy, Dario. How about Zach Ertz in the ugliest offense ever, but he's still a target magnet, and you're going to get him for about $1 on a lot of these waiver wires. And I think we can't completely ignore Zach Ertz, even though he's 33 and coming off of catastrophic knee injuries. If he's going to get 8 targets a game or so, he's a floor play, but again, he's free. And I think a lot of people are going to add Luke Musgrave this week, as they should. But I think you could go and clean up waivers with a couple of these veteran tight ends that are cheap, like we talked about with Hurst. But Ertz is just sitting there. I mean, it's crazy how he comes back. I figured we would have been talking about Trey McBride. If you asked me 2 months ago, we'd be talking about Trey McBride. Ertz has just completely zeroed him.
Yeah. One question I'm answering right now: half PPR, JSN or Addison in the flex this week, and who has the higher upside rest of season? I just pulled up the schedule, and the Vikings play the Eagles this week, Thursday Night Football, and then the Seahawks play the Lions. So because of the matchup, I'm thinking you want to start JSN this week. Lions defense, they looked better against the Chiefs, but still not one of the better pass defenses in the league. And the Eagles have some scary cornerbacks, and we've seen the Vikings get shut down by them before. So I think I'm leaning Jackson Smith and Jigbo this week. What's your take?
It's a difficult one. I mean, Addison got loose and scored. I do think that there's a chance in some of these games that they favor Addison based on the matchup. And I think you say that the Eagles defense is scary, but I think the Eagles defense is also going to really key in on Justin Jefferson. They basically shut him down last year. They also have TJ Hawkinson to check in on. So you might have the advantageous matchup be Jordan Addison this week. But again, yeah, I want to like Jackson Smith and Jigba too, because I think Seattle needs a big bounce back. So neither one of them is like scary to me. I think they're both gut shot plays this week.
Yeah. And then I think for the rest of season part of the question, higher upside, I think, is Jackson Smith and Jigba. We've seen, he shared a field with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and he was the best receiver on that field. I want to bet on that guy. But I also might say that in terms of 50th percentile outcomes for this season alone, I think Addison's might be higher because Addison already has an established role on the Vikings, whereas, JSN, it could take him a little while to get to that upside point. So I think that it's close, leaning JSN if you're shooting for the moon, and Addison for the stability at the moment. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to take it. Let's talk about this one question. He's got a fab question. It's a 10-team PPR league, and he says, or she, the person's name is Gandalf, so they could be just a fan of Lord of the Rings. So we'll say this person. Their running backs are Tony Pollard, Rashad White, Samaje Perine, Jerick McKinnon, and Damian Harris. Tyler Algier, Justice Hill, Kyron Williams, Kenneth Gainwell, Roschon Johnson, Josh Kelly are all available. Would love some suggestions. Definitely dropping Harris for any of these targets, but not sure about whether it would be correct to drop any of the other running backs except Pollard. I think that I would rather have Tyler Algier absolutely over Jerick McKinnon. I probably would take Tyler Algier over Samaje Perine.
I think so too.
Kyron Williams, I think I'm taking over Samaje Perine right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Kenneth Gainwell, I'm taking over Samaje Perine. Roschon Johnson, I'm taking over Samaje Perine, but it's close. And Josh Kelly, based on the Eckler news, I'm probably taking over Samaje Perine. So I will say in a 10-team PPR league, you need difference makers. So I wouldn't go absolutely nuts. But I would prioritize Gainwell, Algier, and then Roschon Johnson. But I miss Kyron Williams. This person has great options.
That's a hell of a waiver wire. Especially to me, Samaje Perine, your hope for him was that this part of the season would be when he was giving you points. Javonte Williams is already the starter. It might be irresponsible for what the Broncos are doing in the long term, but if with that situation where it stands, I think you have to pick up Gainwell, Kyron, Algier, or Kelly ahead of Samaje Perine, just because the upside of some of those offenses combined with having an actual legit role out of the gate for guys like Kyron that surprised us. I think there's 4 dudes right there who I would take ahead of Perine if I'm Gandalf. And then I think that Roschon and Perine, I think you have to take Roschon as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. Yeah, I think that Perine is a floor play that gets you by if you've started out with a hero or 0 RB start. I started Samaje Perine last week in a couple of places, and he's the kind of guy that you need to elevate from in order to kind of win a league. And Roschon's exactly the kind of guy like Dario. All it would take is Deonta Foreman or Khalil Herbert going down, and Roschon Johnson would see a larger role. And he also could just see a larger role because he's, like you said, the best and most well-rounded back there. Here's a good question, Dario. What's your biggest takeaway from week 1, if anything? Points across the league are down, some unexpected results. There was poor weather, etc. I'll say that my biggest takeaway was just how good Tua Tagovailoa and that Miami offense looked. Tua had 450 plus yards passing. He's now second all-time in Dolphins history for 450-yard passing games. And they came out and they beat Los Angeles. And I think Tua outplayed Justin Herbert. He looked fantastic. And I think that, people who waited on quarterback and got Tua Tagovailoa, as long as he holds up, he's going to put up great fantasy numbers because he has 2 of the best weapons in the league. And he has one of the best offensive minds in football. I truly think that Mike McDaniel is special in his play calling. And I know that that's kind of a crutch and we're not supposed to, like guys more because of coaching, but I feel like every single game he puts Tua in a position where he's going to look good. And guess what, Dario? The Jets lost Aaron Rodgers. Buffalo Bills looked poor last night. Cincinnati lost. Kansas City lost. Miami might be a thing this year.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm super I've been bullish on Mike McDaniel all off season, and that was just absolutely thrilling what they were able to do against the Chargers defense. And keep in mind, the Chargers defense got the better of this Dolphins offense last season when these two teams faced off. So very, very encouraging from a coaching standpoint. Let's see. What do we have next? Where do you think Garrett Wilson finishes overall now? What would you consider a good trade target for him?
Oh gosh, it's just really, this is just a sad one for me, Dario.
Painful for you, but
and I'll say that
I had to bring it up.
I'm in Las Vegas, and there's one draft I split with Billy, the last draft of the year in NFFC primetime, and right before the NFFC final primetime league of the summer, they have the NFFC Platinum League, which is a $20,000 entry fee league, and it has a couple of the best high stakes players in the country. A couple guys who have actually been on First Class Fantasy, Nelson Sousa, Chad Schroeder, they're both in it. But I won't say who it is, but it's a guy who's an NFFC Hall of Famer. And in a $20,000 entry league, he took Garrett Wilson 4th overall. That's so the amount of steam for Garrett Wilson in the last couple of weekends in high stakes was incredible. I took him 8th overall or 9th overall in an FFPC main event. And I followed up with Nick Chubb. That team it's going to be hard for me to win that league. I'm going to have to really hit and do some things to even make the playoffs because I think with Aaron Rodgers, I think Garrett Wilson had like top 3 wide receiver in the range of outcomes. I made a prediction with you, Dario, on Man versus Machine that Garrett Wilson was going to catch 14 touchdown passes. Well, he caught a touchdown pass last night. But
oh man, that was. I mean, so I was in the stands and I took out my phone just as they were getting in the red zone. I was filming that play. And after that catch, I was just like rewatching this replay on my phone, zoomed in, seeing him reach across in front of that defender, tap it back over again. That was totally nuts. By far, one of the most impressive touchdown catches I've seen. But I think rest of season right now, I'm kind of thinking low end wide receiver 2. That's kind of where he came out last year. And I don't see the quarterback situation getting significantly better. I mean, what's a realistic? I think best case scenario is they trade for Jameis and he gets, he becomes 150 air yards per game guy. But as long as Zach Wilson is the quarterback,
Andy Dalton, I can think of a few guys that I would take over Zach Wilson. The problem is they're 1-0, and I think that
defense is going to be good.
The defense is going to carry them, and I think that they're perfectly fine playing conservatively. And I think that there's if I want to try to convince myself on something, is that Zach Wilson will have tunnel vision for Garrett Wilson because he's not that talented a quarterback and he can, he's going to look at his first read only. So yeah, but I think Dario, you're right. I think that for me, I'll say based on his immense talent and the fact that he thrived last year with some sketchy quarterback play, I'll say mid-level wide receiver 2. But the idea of him being a top 5 wide receiver in this is terrible.
Yeah, it's gone.
And you had a lot of dynasty, not just redraft.
If you drafted Wilson, who is someone that you would be actively trying to trade him for, like getting in return? Like maybe T. Higgins would be a buy low for me. I think if I have a Garrett Wilson share and the T. Higgins owner is panicked about that goose egg, I think I'm pushing the button on that. Any other names that come to mind?
In home leagues, I'm often trying to go 2-for-1 deals. So I might be trying to trade like Garrett Wilson and like maybe an RB2 to try to pivot up and get some kind of a low end wide receiver 1. Mm-hmm. I think I could also try to look for like a Keenan Allen. Like Garrett Wilson was drafted ahead of him. Garrett Wilson caught the touchdown. But I'm trying to trade up and get out of it if I'm in a 1-year league. If I'm in a dynasty league, I'm doing everything I can to
purely seasonal context.
We could take it to Dynasty a little. We can mix it up. In Dynasty, I want to try to acquire him because I think that it's a funny thing, Dario. One in a Dynasty format, and we're not in a Reddit Dynasty, but I think we could still talk about it. It's not against the law. In a Dynasty format, the teams that had Garrett Wilson entered the season as contenders, thinking that they had a top flight wide receiver 1, and based on their roster construct, now they might have to take a step back. So if they're close, then there might be an opportunity for you to make a big offer for a guy that's like immensely talented that we have very high up in our dynasty rankings. So it's just a mess. It's very sad. Let's move off of this one, or I'm going to break down. Let's keep this going. There's a Herbert or Tua rest of the season, assuming both are healthy. Miami schedule is brutal. I'm still going to go Justin Herbert rest of the season over Tua.
Yeah.
How about you, Dario?
I think so too. I think, I probably still believe in Justin Herbert's talent more, and I still think that Kellen Moore is going to create, a pretty just greater upside offense for the Chargers. But man, I mean, it's tough because with the way this question is framed, if I told you 6 months from now that Tua stayed healthy all season, I probably prefer Tua after maybe seeing one more week of what we're seeing. Because I think that we have people often attribute slightly more rushing upside to Justin Herbert than he really has. Like, I mean, last season he was limited by the injury, but just so far in his career, he's kind of more of a pocket passer quarterback than, say, a Mahomes, or even like he's just about on Burrow's level. And he hasn't quite displayed that next stratospheric level of talent that Burrow displayed last year in terms of just elite quarterback metrics across the board. So I think that if you told me from the future, if you came from the future and told me that Tua would be healthy, I might lean Tua. But just because you can't guarantee health next week or a month from now, I think you still kind of have to lean Herbert for now.
Yeah, and we were sitting here on Man vs. Machine, and I made prediction that Herbert was going to lead the league in passing yards and touchdown passes, and I still think he's going to have some incredible spike week games. And they were pushing the ball downfield a little bit. I'm not sure if the being that run heavy is going to be part of the weekly game plan. I think that could have been just a kind of keep Miami off the field type deal. So we'll be interested to see how Los Angeles does in week 2. I want to keep this going. What else do we have here, Dario?
Is Zach Wilson the worst quarterback in the league?
He's certainly the worst quarterback that's going to be starting this week. And I think if we started going through the backups, there's going to be about half the backups we'd take over him.
You'd take Josh Dobbs.
Okay, that's fine. That's that one. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
If it's Zach Wilson versus Josh Dobbs, I'm probably taking Zach Wilson. But in terms of the most of the other starters, yeah, I take all of them. I'd take Ryan Tannehill. I'd take any of these guys that the Jets could trade for. Absolutely.
Right, I mean, even like, I mean, the Browns aren't going to trade DTR, especially after they shipped away Dobbs. But if you're a Jets fan at this moment in time, you'd much rather have DTR under center than Zach Wilson, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And how about trying to trade for Jacoby Brissett to Washington? Sam Howell wins the job. Like, there's a million guys that they should be like kicking the tires on to see if they could trade for, because with that incredible defense and the talent that they have with guys like Wilson and Breece Hall, this team, you can't have a team walking into a game needing to pull shutouts, and I think that's pretty much what they're staring at with Zach Wilson.
I've got a question that I'm answering right now here. Thoughts on Brandon Aiyuk? Can he be a wide receiver 1? And what do you see as his ceiling in 2023?
He absolutely can be a wide receiver 1. I mean, last year he finished as like wide receiver 15, and he looked possessed. He looked incredible game 1. He had 2 touchdown catches. He went over 125 yards receiving. And this is a guy that's kind of been the talk of San Francisco training camp based on his incredible play. So for a guy to take that leap from wide receiver 15 to inside the wide receiver 1 line, it's not even that big of a deal. You're talking about like a 1.5 more a game. And I think that we're not questioning the talent of Aiyuk. I think that this is his year. I'm not sure if I would have him as a wide receiver 1, but I certainly have him as a top 15 wide receiver. Where do you think?
Yeah, I think his ceiling is probably like wide receiver 5 on the season, right? Like, if everything breaks his way, I don't think he's hitting Justin Jefferson level, because he's not going to have that volume that you need to see to hit that level when he's sharing the field with all the elite talent that there is in San Francisco. But when you have that talent, you can run pure on touchdowns. You can run pure on catch rate and yards per reception, these things that are the constituent pieces of fantasy points. And you can put together a season that finds you in the top 5, top 8 fantasy wide receivers. He's certainly off to a good start, but if someone comes at me, right, if I'm in a home league and someone comes at me with a crazy trade offer for Brandon Aiyuk, I'm probably giving it a pretty good look, don't you think? Like, this is, I mean, doesn't this feel like a typical sell high opportunity with Aiyuk?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can improve off of Aiyuk to a guy that's going to have a higher weekly targets and more of a traditional wide receiver one, I think that's fine. Like, if you told me I can trade up from Aiyuk to like a CeeDee Lamb type,
Right,
with
exactly.
Aiyuk plus, yeah, I think that's fine. But I wouldn't trade him just to trade him because he had a big spike week and you paid wide receiver 3 prices.
Right. I'm saying if someone comes at you like wanting to give you the farm for Brandon Aiyuk just because of that week 1 performance, let them overpay.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. I think that's sharp, Dario. Want to keep this going. There was one person said, is McKinnon still a stash for the receiving work? I said I have no trouble pivoting off of McKinnon. Here's another question. Pick up Puka Nacua or Tyler Algier with my first waiver wire spot in a 10-team league. So this is not a fab question. This is a snake question. So it's a waiver wire priority, which changes some things. He's thin at wide receiver, but he's of the opinion that Algier, running back, is the more valuable pickup rest of season. His wide receivers are Amon-Ra St. Brown, Keenan Allen, Brandon Cooks, Cortland Sutton, Elijah Moore, and Deontay Johnson, who is hurt. I'd probably need Puka more, but Algier seems like a must add. I'm not sure if he needs Puka more.
I was gonna say, I don't know how deep your league is that you need to, like, this upcoming week. You're definitely starting Amon-Ra, Allen, and Cooks ahead of Puka. And
Cooks ahead of Puka is an interesting one. But I'll say this: like, he's got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Keenan Allen. We don't know how many wide receivers
what the
start.
running back situation is, the flex,
and we don't know how many flexes. But I think if it's a 1 flex, 2 wide receivers, I would take my chances, and I would add Tyler Algier, thinking he could be a back end RB2. I'm just like, I like Puka a lot, but to think that he's gonna move ahead of Keenan Allen at any point, he won't. And when Deontay Johnson comes back, he won't move ahead of him as well.
And
so
and when Cooper Kupp comes back, when Cooper Kupp comes back, I think that Puka Nacua's value drops precipitously. So not only that, but I think that both Algier and Puka seem like guys whose point scoring is going to trend down over the next month or so. And then I think it just depends on that roster need and that league setting. But I mean, we've been going for an hour here, Theo. I think do you want to wrap us up with one more question?
Yeah, if you're in the Reddit AMA, we're gonna keep answering questions online, but we're gonna wrap this one up. Dario, why don't you let everybody know what they can expect from fantasy football across America, what you have going on this week, next week?
Yeah, so Fantasy Football Across America, if you guys haven't heard, is the show where I am traveling around the country in my van, and I'm primarily traveling to see a football game in every NFL stadium this season. Also, along the way, going to be bringing interviews with all your favorite fantasy analysts. So yesterday, got to sit down and chop it up with our good friend, the Podfather, Matt Kelly. And then later today, I'm going to be recording an episode with my man Theo right here. I'll see you on Long Island. And just continuing to make my way around. There's already, I believe, 3 episodes on YouTube. Expect episode 4 with Matt any day now. And I mean, there's some big names lined up as guests, like people that honestly I can't believe are willing to give me their time of day. So it's going to be a show that you don't want to miss.
Yeah, definitely check it out. And then First Class Fantasy will be back on Thursdays every week at 3:30. This week I have Alan Soslowski and Jim Coventry. Both the RotoWire guys are coming on. That should be great. And then Friday, you can check out press coverage. I'm going to have Scott Connor on. He always brings it when he's on our podcast. And yeah, this is going to be fun. We're going to be doing this again. Dario and I will be doing another one of these AMAs. So make sure to check out First Class Fantasy Overtime. And you can only find that here on Twitter and YouTube. This is not going to be a podcast. So make sure you tune in. Dario, drive safely. The New Jersey Turnpike is no joke. The LIE is no joke. I know you're used to the California roads, so you're a little bit hardened from the LA traffic, but this is no joke, man. Be careful around the bridges and tunnels. Everybody enjoy the rest of your afternoon and evening. And I'm excited, Dario. We got football back, man. Nothing better than this.
Yeah,
right?
no, I mean, after that game last night, I was just thinking to myself, I'm so happy the NFL is back. It doesn't get any better.
Yeah, so definitely check out Fantasy Football Across America. Definitely check out all the great podcasts we have. If you liked our waiver wire talk, definitely check out my waiver wire article. And the Podfather drops his waiver wire stream every week as well in season. Make sure you're checking out our great DFS content. Make sure you're checking out our great gambling content and all the new podcasts that we have going on here at Player Profiler. Take it easy, everybody.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.